I call on my Republican colleagues to join me in calling for the firing of Bob Mueller.
This is disgusting, unaccountable bias, and there's no way that could not affect a person's work.
I think the public trust in this whole thing is gone.
We are now beginning to better understand the magnitude of this insider bias on Mr. Mueller's team.
While congressional Republicans continue to push their pretext for Donald Trump to fire special counsel Robert Mueller, the resistance is making its own preparations to push back. MoveOn.org is already organizing a rapid response strategy to convene protests within hours of any announcement that Mueller has been fired. And this week, as Trump allies' drumbeat to fire Mueller reached a fever pitch, Walter Schaub, the former director of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, sounded his own call to resist, tweeting, "Make a plan, folks. Be ready to take to the streets. This is an attack on our republic." Malcolm Nance and Reid are back with me, and we're now joined by Business Insider political correspondent Natasha Bertrand, who's been on fire with this reporting lately. So thank you for making some time for us. Okay, Natasha, there are two separate stories that I want you to unpack so that people can understand the difference between them. At this point, I'm a little bit confused. You reported on Friday that the Department of Justice is saying that the release of those private text messages, selected text messages between two FBI agents who were on the Hillary Clinton email probe, that was not authorized. Explain.
So the OIG is investigating these text messages sent by Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, which were essentially anti-Trump. They expressed a lot of disdain for Trump during the election between 2015
but not just Trump.
and 2016.
They didn't like a lot of people.
Right. So they didn't like Bernie Sanders. They didn't like Eric Holder, et cetera. So the OIG actually did authorize the release of these text messages to Congress last month. But what was interesting about this is that he did not authorize, or he was not consulted before these text messages were then released to the press last week. Now, there was also early this month, early December, these text messages were actually leaked to certain members of the media, and those were very vague characterizations of the text messages, just that they were anti-Trump, et cetera. And that then led Devin Nunes, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, to put pressure on the Justice Department, saying that he was essentially going to subpoena them for the text messages. So the Justice Department now was under pressure to release the texts, which are, again, under investigation. It's very unusual for these private correspondences to be released to either Congress or the press while they're still under investigation. So this was another attempt to kind of muddy the waters and undermine Mueller's probe.
So let me just for a moment. Do we know whether or not the release of those text messages came from the top of the Department of Justice, meaning Jeff Sessions is recused from this investigation, Devin Nunes is recused from this investigation? How does it happen that selected text messages from an FBI agent that are selectively characterized as anti-Trump end up in the hands of Devin Nunes?
We don't know. We don't know who actually. So that was a leak. That was the unauthorized leak that I reported on.
It was designed to help Donald Trump.
That was
be clear.
It was it gave him ammunition to say that this is a biased investigation, and ultimately it did help him with that narrative. But we still don't know who authorized the release of the text messages to the press. It was not the OIG, so we're still trying to figure out who that was.
Okay, let's now go to story number 2. And this is that Bob Mueller has obtained emails that have to do with the Trump transition into office. Explain that.
Right. So Axios reported last night that the transition team actually was using government email servers to conduct its business over the course of the transition. And the GSA, which is the organization that oversees the transition team and its emails, actually gave those emails to Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller is, of course, a government authority, so he has the ability to send a letter to the GSA and say, hey, can I see these emails? And without a subpoena, actually. So it's a very basic process. Then Trump's lawyers, the Trump transition team lawyers, actually went and sent a letter to Congress, bypassing Mueller entirely, kind of try to bring this into the court of public opinion, saying that what Mueller did was unlawful because he went around the transition team. And the reason why Mueller went around the transition team, people think, is because he did not trust them to hand over all of the relevant emails. He believed perhaps that some of them would be deleted because, of course, that is what the transition team, what the lawyers would have done. They would have sorted out what they call irrelevant emails before.
You mean
they
the way
handed them
Hillary
over.
Clinton sorted out what were private emails from the emails that she turned over that were the source of Donald Trump saying lock her up?
That is
so you
what
mean they did the
to
same
do.
thing?
That is what they wanted to do before they handed them over to Mueller.
And they're upset that their emails have been distributed. That's interesting. thing as well. Lots of irony here. I want to read the response from the spokesperson for Bob Mueller responding to the Reuters story and the NBC News national security reporter, and Ken Delaney, Aaron Ken Delaney also reported on this as well. And they said the following: when we have obtained emails in the course of our ongoing criminal investigation, we have secured either the account owner's consent or appropriate criminal process. Well, they didn't have their consent. That says to me that obtaining those emails was a part of their appropriate criminal process.
It was a government-to-government request, right? I mean, Bob Mueller is a government authority, and the GSA is a government agency. They were using private email servers, and actually the government email servers, and actually one of the top attorneys for the GSA came out and said, well, actually, if they had read the fine print, they would have realized that there was no expectation of privacy here.
And by the way, guys, the GSA, for those who do not understand the General Services Administration, it's not some anti-Trump bastion. It's the agency that let him have the hotel. It's the agency that authorized Donald Trump, President of the United States, to own a hotel blocks from the White House and make money letting foreign officials stay in the hotel and swipe their cards. That's who the GSA is.
It's an administrative agency.
It's an administrative agency.
Of the United States government.
So lots of irony here that I want to unpack to you guys. You guys are going to remember my analyst here on this. Let's start with the release of those text messages. I'm going to start with you first because you were an FBI double agent, so you worked with these people.
Yeah.
The idea that an agent inside the FBI would have their personal text messages selectively released in order to bolster a case that the FBI is biased against Donald Trump. Your thoughts?
It's absurd. I mean, look, this goes back we're losing sight of the context, right? So this harkens back to the days of the unmasking, a few months ago, right? Where essentially the Republicans were trying to frame this idea that there was intelligence that unmasked Trump officials, U.S. persons, and that was somehow biased against Trump, that there was this improper, and as Donald Trump said, his wires were tapped. I mean, it's completely taking things out of context. You're allowed to have a personal opinion. You're allowed to vote for a Democrat or Republican. Look, there's no doubt about that. At the worst, what these people did was use a government device for, personal
sexual affairs.
Right.
They were chatting with
right. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they're not objective, professional, individuals who are able to do their job.
We should make the point that at the time, Strzok, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, was not investigating Donald Trump. This was during the campaign. He was investigating Hillary Clinton.
That's right.
Okay, so that's important. Okay, let's go to the next thing, which is the potential constitutional crisis that we talked about in the opening here. The potential of firing Bob Mueller. This is Jackie Spear, Congresswoman, on Friday, talking about a rumor on the Hill about Mueller imminently being fired. Take a listen.
The rumor on the Hill, when I left yesterday, was that the president was going to make a significant speech at the end of next week, and on December 22nd, when we are out of D.C., he was going to fire Robert Mueller.
Okay, one more quick soundbite. This is Rod Rosenstein, who is the only person who is legally allowed to fire Bob Mueller. He is the Deputy Attorney General. This is him talking at the House Oversight hearing on Wednesday.
Have you seen good cause to fire Special Counsel Mueller?
No. I believe that based upon his reputation, his service, his patriotism, and his experience with the department and with the FBI, I believe he was an ideal choice for this task.
All right, let me turn to my journalist here. Have you heard, do you have any reporting that backs up what Jackie Spear is saying, that there are rumors on the Hill that Bob Mueller is imminently going to be fired right before Christmas?
I have heard the same thing, but the way that he would probably do it is by repealing a regulation that would prevent him from directly firing Bob Mueller himself. So right now, really the only way that he could, one of the only ways that he could fire Mueller is by going through Rosenstein. But there is one other way, and this is built into the special counsel regulations back in the early 2000s, which is that he could essentially repeal that regulation that would then allow him to fire Mueller directly. He would not have to go around Rosenstein. Now, whether or not there's a kind of comment period that would, require him to make this announcement and then step back and wait for people to weigh in on whether or not that's actually, allowed is up for debate. And that's actually something that needs to be explored more. But there is a way legally where he could do it himself.
Deregulation is Donald Trump's other big thing, ironically enough. Good timing, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, we know that he wants Bob Mueller out. Every time that the investigation hits a crescendo where there's some news drop that shows that something is happening, what does Donald Trump do? He freaks out. He goes after people. He starts attacking. as an intelligence officer, this is what we would call indications and a warning.
Yeah, and he's using his affinity media, he's using basically state media, what it amounts to at this point, to whip up a frenzy on the right that Mueller is essentially a criminal.
Well, over at Fox News, we saw that they had a headline with Kellyanne Conway that said a coup is happening. This is insane, all right? Do I have to be the one that comes out and tells the American public the last time we had a crisis of this magnitude was not the Civil War? The Civil War, they at least used the precepts of the Constitution to make a legal separation from the United States. It was George III, and it's enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. Other than putting troops in your house, many of these things are happening. If he takes away the fundamental ability for us to police ourselves and to police a president of the United States, he has done the ultimate obstruction and justice. He is dismantling the Constitution, and it cannot stand. We cannot allow it to stand. Those of us who have sworn this oath, anybody who is watching this, who is in government right now, who would think that this is good, well, then you're just joining a Politburo. Okay, and we don't need Saddam Hussein's People's Council here to cheer him on. What we need to do is defend this nation's democracy.
Well said. Malcolm Nance, Naveed Jamali, Natasha Bertrand, thank you all for being here. I'm sorry this is such an alarmist open to the show, but this is serious stuff, and you really need to start thinking about it. I've said before, you need to start using your lurid imagination to understand Donald Trump, or start looking at governments around the world, because a lot of people across this world live with governments like this for decades. In the United States, we have mechanisms that are supposed to be able to protect us. We need to start using them. Coming up, I'm off my soapbox. The latest on the unrest caused by Donald Trump's comments on Jerusalem after the break.